So thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it. So I'm Scott Spiegel. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the International Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. I'll give you a little bit of background of who we are and what that means. And I thought while I do that, I would give you a tour of our integrated report. 2017 for us was the first time that we actually did an integrated report. And so it was really exciting for us to follow the integrated reporting framework and adopt as many of the best practices as we could. So what I thought I would do is, in order to show you how we adopted to the integrated reporting framework, I thought what I would do is give you more of a narrative of some of the key elements through our integrated report. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just flip past this table of contents and just show you a little bit about how we normally think about what we want to communicate to our stakeholders. I think what the integrated reporting framework did for us this year is really think differently about what we communicate and to whom we communicate. And I will admit, a lot of what we historically communicated prior to doing integrated reporting was from an inside out perspective. I think one of the most exciting things for us was really taking into consideration a lot of the outside in elements that we would not normally have contemplated including in the report. And I'll comment on some of those in a second. But what we traditionally do is we start all of our annual reports, and in this case, our first integrated report, with a letter from leadership. And we spend 2 or 3 pages of just articulating from our president and CEO, as well as the chairman and vice chairman of our board, about what we were most excited about over the last year. I think for us, the most important thing here to communicate is what you see highlighted here in purple. This is what we wanted to communicate most, is what is our purpose? Why are we here? And our purpose here is to champion trust, opportunity, and prosperity for the accounting profession around the globe. We are the professional accounting body that represents close to 670,000 members around the globe. And the association was formed back in 2017 by the votes of 2 founding bodies, the AICPA and CIMA. AICPA is the American Institute of CPAs, and CIMA is the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants. And the 2 respective boards of directors voted or agreed a few years ago that the 2 organizations should come closer together and integrate strategy, management, and operations. And when we did that in 2016, we operationalized this new association to help us do this integration starting the 1st of January in 2017. So as I page down to just show you some of the other elements of the integrated report, what I really wanted to start with was our strategy and how we add value to the membership. So I'm going to just flip around a little bit and just go back to the table of contents for a moment and show you some of what we do in terms of our strategy and business model. And so I'm going to blow this up a little bit so everybody can see. So although this is about 10 or 15 pages deep into the integrated report, I think one of the really neat things about what we learned and what we adopted was communicating what our strategy and business model is. Admittedly, as we started to think through this, we haven't been the most comfortable in terms of how much we share with the outside community. Most of our conversations occur with the board of directors, and it generally stops there. But in this case, by adopting the framework, what we've done is we've created this one slide which shows what our vision, mission, and purpose are. And I reiterated over here our purpose statement earlier on. And then below that vision, mission, and purpose, what our strategic objectives are and how we create value. So how we create value for our members is really through a couple of channels. One is through what you'll see here in the middle around global advocacy, and I thought this would be important. We are big advocates, not only to the business community, but to local and national governments in terms of advancing not only the accounting profession, but also looking in terms of how regulations help or hurt businesses. So we spend an enormous amount of time doing advocacy for the accounting profession around the globe. I mean, the second thing that we do is through our growth and value initiatives, we are very big on our members doing lifelong learning. Now, we are big advocates of making sure that our members have the proper skills and proper tools in front of them to make sure that they keep their relevancy around the globe. Third, we do an enormous amount of work in the thought leadership space. And so as you start to dive into this integrated report, we spend a little bit of time communicating to our stakeholders just how we create value. So I'm actually going to go back to the top and just maybe walk you through a little bit in terms of our table of contents. So this is how we organized our integrated report. We covered the topics of governance, the external environment, the strategy model that I just showed you, KPIs, risks and opportunities, compensation, and we talked a little bit about resources and relationships. What is so dynamic for us is most of the topics that you see here on our table of contents are things that are new elements in terms of what we've disclosed. So we did not typically get into a lot of detail around our governance model, but as I click to governance, we spend a little bit of time right in the beginning of our integrated report talking about what our governance looks like. So on this first page of governance, it really takes our stakeholders through the journey in terms of how the two bodies, AICPA and CIMA, came together, and an acknowledgement here in January 2017 that we actually launched this new association, which is the vehicle in which we are integrating our strategy, management, and operations together. And then when you page down to the next page, we actually spend time talking about who our board of directors are. And what's really unique in terms of the way we've disclosed this in the past is we're very proud of the diversity of our board of directors. And we do have some esteemed colleagues listed here on our board of directors. But what we had never normally done was talk about what the diversity looked like. And I think what the framework provided us was an opportunity for us to show not only the male, female, and demographic breakdowns, but also the geographic composition of our board of directors. It is truly diverse, and we do have representatives across 5 continents. Secondly, we talk about the external environment. And again, I mentioned a few minutes ago, we have not been the most comfortable in terms of sharing a lot of external environmental factors with our annual report. We normally talk about other things in terms of what we've done to help the accounting and finance profession move forward, but we really don't normally talk about those external environmental factors in a very public forum. And so, you know, I would just reflect that the integrated report for us was a great way for us to communicate to our stakeholders the 4 or 5 forces that we believe are going to be most relevant, not only on our organization, but our members. And so what you see here is a conversation that we have with our stakeholders around geopolitical shifts, the complexity of the regulatory environment around the globe, where technology and cybersecurity sits in terms of the importance for our members, other financial changes that are taking place around the globe, and just the changing workforce dynamics, which is not only technology, but it's also the multi-generational workforce. As I continue down and past the strategic and operating model, which we've spent a few slides on in our integrated report, I'm just scanning just to give you a flavor for this. We do spend a little bit of time articulating what our core strategic priorities are. And so for 2017, we had 4 main strategic priorities, which we then communicated out to our stakeholders. One was about promoting competency and making sure that our members have the most relevant competencies to keep their skills fresh. The second was evolving the auditing profession. And so as I just pause for a moment and just talk about how much work we are spending on the audit profession between data analytics, blockchain, and other technologies that are out there, we do see a disruptive force in terms of auditors and the auditing profession. So we are spending an enormous amount of time making sure that we keep the audit fresh and evolved so that the profession is vibrant going into the future. Our third strategic priority was opening up the US market to another designation called CGMA. The CGMA designation stands for the Chartered Global Management Accountant, and it is a designation we did in partnership with CIMA to help really professionalize the management accounting space. So people like me and others on this webcast who do management accounting for a corporation to really help keep their skills fresh and stand out into the workforce. And then finally, our fourth strategic initiative was transforming our organization. So as two organizations come together and integrate strategy, management, and operations, we had an enormous amount of work that we needed to do. So this was a fourth strategic priority for us. As I get towards the end of the narrative in our framework, one of the interesting things for us as we adopted the framework was really publicizing our KPIs. Again, we've always talked internally about our KPIs, but I think the framework really gave us a chance to talk about not only where we've had some success, but also where we've had some challenges. And so before we get to the visualization of our KPIs, we do provide the reader an overview of what our balance sheet and financial position looks like, a very typical word narrative. But as I page down to the next page, what you'll find is more narrative on those four main strategic initiatives, and then really here the visualization of what we've decided our KPIs were for 2017, with a discussion box on what worked really well for us in terms of our core metrics. I think the most important thing for us, quite frankly, is really this next page on where we didn't meet some of our KPIs. I think we've struggled a little bit in terms of admitting maybe where we didn't meet our targets. And I think the framework has really given us an opportunity to be more transparent with our constituents in terms of the metrics that we didn't fully meet. And so we've had to actually get more comfortable in terms of how we communicate those KPIs that we did not meet and what we're going to do about those in the future. I really like this section of the integrator report about looking ahead. We have a 3-year strategic plan that is a 2018 to 2020 strategic plan. And it talks about a whole host of trends, the implications, and where we're going to align our strategic resources behind that. So I think it gives a reader a really good outlook as to where we see some of those external forces having an impact on our business, and what we're going to do in terms of our alignment to the strategic priorities. And then lastly, maybe as I wrap up just some of my comments and then just take a breath and see what questions people have. You know, I think for us as an organization, we spend an enormous amount of time thinking about risk. We've adopted many well-adopted risk frameworks and have spent most of our time talking about risk with the board. I think this was a really interesting way for us to talk about risks and opportunities in a more public forum. So we do use an enterprise risk framework that helps us identify our key risks. And we spend a little bit of time talking about where and how we spend aggregating our risks. But this next page really is the first time that we've publicly talked about what we believe our key enterprise risks are. And so on the left-hand side, we are talking about what our key enterprise risks are, and then with a mitigation or potential opportunity for us to help mitigate those risks on the right-hand side. Then lastly is our conversation around executive compensation or remuneration. What I love about the framework is it allowed us an opportunity to talk about the diligence that our own organization spends in terms of how compensation and remuneration metrics are aggregated. We've always talked about this just with the board, but I think it's really important for public trust for us to talk more openly about our compensation metrics. And so here we talk about the notion that we actually have a remuneration and talent committee, and talks about how and what that actual committee does, and then also talks about where readers of our annual report and integrated report can find more information on specific compensation. So that is probably the tour of the front end of our integrated report. The last page here just talks about our staff metrics and some other external relationships that we have that are really core to our business. And so we do spend a little bit of time on the slide I was just on talking about our employee retention rates, but also this last slide on just key external partnerships and alliances that we have that are really critical to keeping the profession moving forward. And then this then moves right into our financial statements, which are another 30 pages or so of just disclosures. So I'm happy to pause for questions or comments and just give you a more deep dive into some lessons learned, et cetera, on our adoption of the framework this past year.
Great. Thanks, Scott. What we're going to do now is turn off the recording. So if you're watching this on YouTube, please join us for a future meeting. And we continue and have pretty vibrant discussions after these integrated report tours. So we welcome you next time.